Hi, and welcome to the Culinary Journey. Today, we're going to explore the world of bourbon, and I have with me Tony Corbett from Macadoodles, and he's going to tell us a little bit about Macadoodles. If you haven't been there, I think most people are familiar with it if you live in Northwest Arkansas, but also many other places.
Yeah, that's right. Good morning. We've been around a long time down in Pineville, and most people in Northwest Arkansas are very familiar with us. But a lot of people don't realize we've actually got a lot of stores today, and primarily a franchise business. We have over 14 stores.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, we just opened a store in Omaha, Nebraska last year, and one in Oklahoma as well. So, and we also entered the St. Louis market last year as well. So we have over 14 stores today.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're in charge of that.
Yeah, I oversee the franchise stores, and we continue to grow. So look out for great things from us. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's wonderful. It's my go-to. Whether it's beer, wine, liquor, I know you're going to have it.
We're going to have it. Yeah,
so
we're going to have it. That's right.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the different bourbons that are made, and I think first we're going to show a picture of Woodford Reserve. Last year, my husband and I did go to the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, and this is just going to show you the process, starting with fermentation. And I'll let you explain that.
Well, yeah, fermentation basically is the fundamental process, right? So after the mash and all those things. And it's very similar to what the original Scotch and Irish whiskies did many, many years ago. It's the same kind of process. The American bourbons are more geared towards what we call a column still, whereas a Scotch whiskey or an Irish whiskey might be more in a kettle kind of still.
Okay.
But the fundamental difference, of course, is wheat. And the American bourbon is made, fundamentally with wheat, whereas Europeans and Scotch whiskey in particular is more grains and those kind of things.
So, and the wheat corn has to be a certain percentage.
Corn, to make it actually an official bourbon in Kentucky, corn has to be a certain percentage of the recipe, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a requirement, yeah, to make it officially bourbon, yeah.
Wow. And that's all funny. And talk about bourbon, it can only be called bourbon if it's distilled in Kentucky, but apparently that's not true.
Well, not exactly, no. And, I don't think that necessarily the name or the nomenclature bourbon is proprietary to Kentucky, because as we know today, and you'll see here, and I brought some examples, bourbons are made throughout the United States. So this one in particular here is made in Utah as an example.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and there's a growing number of bourbons in Texas and even in the state of Missouri as well. So there's,
it's pretty popular.
It's pretty popular.
Now. It is like the number one go-to.
It is the number one go-to. It's the most popular category we have in spirits. It's growing the most in popularity, and also there's a lot of niche kind of, if you like, artesian style bourbons being made today throughout the country and becoming more and more popular. It's actually hard to carry every bourbon.
Yeah.
And of course, depends if it's distributed in the state, right? So some bourbons may be distributed in Missouri as an example, but not necessarily in the state of Arkansas. We try to obviously carry as many as we can.
Yeah, it's you see that, well, even just from this small
selection here.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to highlight it's not just about Kentucky straight bourbon. Today, there's a lot of variations on bourbon. We have flavored bourbons today. I've got some examples here.
Okay.
This is one of the more popular ones. It's actually peanut butter. So
I think my husband has a peanut butter bourbon. Is it Old Smoky?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I opened the cabinet when I was looking at the different ones, and I'm like, peanut butter?
Right.
Now, I've heard of the honey.
Yeah, honey is extremely popular. This is a wild turkey product, and one of the top sellers. Honey is a very popular mix right now, and most of the major distilleries are doing a honey flavor. And then, of course, we have the more, if you look at Jim Beam as an example, they have every conceivable flavor you can possibly imagine. This one happens to be pineapple, but they have peach and apple and so on. So,
Well, what I found interesting when we went to Jim Beam, discovered that they make Basil Hayden.
yeah,
Had no idea.
that's right.
It was just, oh my gosh, because I never thought of Jim Beam as being a higher end, although there are products there that.
There are, and so a
That
lot
are
of the
very
of the
good.
distilleries today make multiple labels, Sazerac, and so it does get a little confusing, but that's right. And then of course we have the basic bourbons. We have the regular bourbon, but we also have rye, which is very popular with some drinkers. Not as much as straight bourbon.
Yeah.
But here's a couple of examples of rye. Angel's Envy is a very, very good brand of rye whiskey compared to straight whiskeys. And then we have, everyday kind of bourbons. So I would say, good, better, best, right? So we have
Okay.
everyday bourbons, and then we have middle tier bourbons, which are very popular on the shelf. And then, of course, we have the allocated bourbons over here, which is a little bit more difficult. So
Yeah.
allocated bourbons like Blanton's are hard to find bourbons and not necessarily on the shelf all times and kind of hard to find.
Yeah.
And as we know, very high demand, right?
Yes, because we had to wait for one to come in when my husband was on the search for a Blanton's.
Right.
And finally, we did get one, but he paid $120 for it.
That's right.
We
And
go to the distillery and not near that price.
Yeah.
And you could get 3 per person, I think it was, 2 or 3 per person.
something like that. So there's a lot of allocated bourbons. This one, of course, the Blanton's one of the more popular ones here. There's a Buffalo Trace. But these middle market bourbons are very popular every day, good pricing. And then, you have your Jack Daniels, of course, and Maker's Mark, which is, good for people who like to mix with Coca-Cola and those kind of things.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Maker's Mark is a little bit sweeter and warmer, so it works well. If you're doing it cooking, it works really good for desserts, jams, jellies, sauces. And your high rye bourbon, which is a little more spicy or peppery, like one from Four Roses, works better with dressings and fruit-based dishes. Has a brightness to offset the rich and creamy ingredients in a sauce.
Yeah.
So, if you want to cook with a high rye, then, you're going to look at what foods you're making, and that'll tell you which one is going to give you the best flavor in the foods that you're preparing.
Yeah, quite so, yeah. Yeah, and they all have, what's amazing about bourbons is every single one of them has their own unique profile. And, consumers, prefer one over the other. If you're a bourbon rye drinker, you're going to stick to rye and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's a very diverse category within spirits.
Well, and rye is typically used for making Manhattans.
Yep, it is. And we've even got here a product where you have the bourbon already mixed with a Manhattan.
Oh.
So there are, again,
They don't have to get the shaker
you
out.
don't have to get a shaker out. And again, here's another demonstration that the category is so deep and broad today. Not only flavors, but now producers are coming out with cocktail mixes already done.
Okay.
This is a great example of a Manhattan all ready to go. And then on top of that, here's a Woodford Reserve product it's already got the syrup in it. This is a mint julep by Woodford Reserve, right here. You can see it, and you can get these as well. So they're making it more. Yeah, they're making
We can be more lazy and
it can
just.
be a little easier to make if you want to make specialized cocktails. Yeah, of course you can do them traditionally, but those products are also available as well.
Well, shoot, I'm going to have to try the Manhattan one. Terry was asking for one the other the other day, and I was like, had to look it up, and
Right.
went, well, we've got everything. We never did have it.
Yeah, the mint julep, of course, the Kentucky Derby just ended a couple of weeks ago, and we did a spot on mint juleps, which is and Woodford Reserve sponsors the Kentucky Derby,
Cool.
and has done for a long time. Over 240,000 mint juleps were served at the Kentucky Derby this year.
Oh, I should have brought pictures of our mantle, and we have a big cutout in our living room that's actually framed with wood from the pallets of Woodford Reserve. They donate them to Longwood Woods,
Right.
and they have all of these. They have them from Maker's Mark and Woodford. And, we were just looking for a different look.
Right.
So
Probably smells quite.
if you scratch it,
Yeah.
our contractor, when he was cutting it, he said, you could really smell the bourbon.
There you go. There you go.
So, they're nice and black from the distilling process.
Right.
Because when you go there and you see these black buildings, you're like, what? And that's all from the distilling process.
It is, and there's a thing called the angel share, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't know that.
yeah. So during the aging process, right, there's a certain amount of evaporation,
Right.
and that evaporation is called the angel's share because it goes up.
Oh.
Right.
So they drink too,
Yeah.
or inhale.
And then here's another tip: the barrels themselves that are used in aging, also then the spirit soaks into the wood, right?
Yeah.
And that's called the devil's cut. So they got the angel's share and the devil's cut. And Jim Beam actually have a product on our shelves called the devil's cut, and they've actually been able to extract the bourbon from the wood in the barrels and turn it into
Wow.
a bourbon. And if you look on the shelf, you'll see a particular label from Jim Beam that actually states the devil's cut, and they've actually been able to extract that spirit from the wood to make that
Wow.
work.
It's amazing, the variety that is there. And, like I was talking about in cooking, I do have here, and I've already made the marinade. This is supposed to be a beef tenderloin, but I can't afford one, so I have fillets, and I pre-made the marinade for it. And it is 2 tablespoons of bourbon, three-quarter cup, I can't talk today, of vegetable oil, half cup of soy sauce, brown sugar, red wine vinegar, garlic, ginger, and coriander.
There you go.
And just mix it up. And then these are going to marinate, and then we'll have them for dinner tonight.
Did you say coriander?
Yeah.
Oh.
Ground coriander. I'm sure they not cumin.
I call it something else, but that's all right.
Oh. What do you call it?
Cilantro.
Well, yeah, that too. I've got that growing outside. So, and then that'll go into the refrigerator, and
For how long?
it says 8 hours, but that's for like a 5-pound tenderloin.
Right.
So really by 4 or 5 o'clock they'll be ready.
Absolutely.
Do them out on the grill and see how that works. So anyway, I thought, it would be fun to show at least, or talk about one meat dish. And of course, you could do chicken, shrimp. There are lots and lots of recipes of chicken and shrimp and even desserts using different bourbons.
There really is. And the good thing is to do a marinade such as you're doing, or to use bourbon in cooking, you don't really need a lot.
Correct.
So, you don't need a lot of the spirit to create the flavor itself. So it's a very affordable way to cook because, if you follow the recipe, you don't need large quantities because it's not the cheapest spirit in the world, but
No.
that's the one good thing about it. Yeah.
Well, like this recipe is 2 tablespoons of bourbon compared to how much of all of the other ingredients.
Yeah, it's
so not very much. But then the alcohol also evaporates
It does, yeah.
during the cooking process.
Yeah, it does in most cases, yeah. And then leaves the flavor behind.
Yeah.
Kind of like the devil's cut. You know, and again, that's one good thing. The alcohol does evaporate, right?
Yes.
So depending on what proof you're using, and generally, you know, it might be best to use a lower proof than a higher proof, right?
Yes. It was interesting the way that they explain some of that. Like Cooper's Craft, I think, was a lower cut
Yeah.
to use with specific meats.
And it'll always tell you on the label what the proof is, right?
Yes.
And you know, the higher the proof, the stronger the bite, and you know,
Yeah.
the lower the proof. I guess the best way to describe it is more mellow to the palate, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. You know, we went to 23 different distilleries while we were there.
Yeah.
So we did, and I did not do tasting at all of them. I couldn't. But our nephew and my husband had a blast.
Now, I would say with cooking, don't use any of the flavored bourbons, because that will, you know, the flavor itself will just overpower, you know, your recipe. So if you're doing something, as an example, you know, with pineapple, don't use pineapple bourbon, because it'll, you know,
It won't be good.
It's overkill, right?
Yeah.
So if you're doing something, as an example, with pineapple, you know, with cooking, use straight bourbons.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about these other brownies and cookies that I made, and the different glasses, and the
do
different the ice that you use in a rocks glass.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Experience the Macadoodles difference. Shop leisurely in our friendly and spacious store 7 days a week. Browse our wine cellar. We offer the top labels and hot new wines. Wide aisles, hardwood floors, and easy-to-find, well-lit displays make shopping enjoyable. Customers are our #1 priority. If you can't find something, our courteous staff will assist you, and we'll even help you to your car with your purchase. World-class customer service. Largest and best selection in the area. Low prices. Experience the Macadoodles difference today.
Welcome back. Well, we are going to continue now. I'm going to talk about a couple more recipes that I brought, and all of these recipes came from the book, Which Fork Do I Use with My Bourbon? Something else that I picked up on the bourbon trail,
There you go.
along with my Pappy Van Winkle book.
Yep.
So anyway, these are orange bourbon brownies. And the recipe did not call for orange bourbon, but I make my own, and I thought I would kick it up. So in order to make orange bourbon, you take an orange, quarter it, and then actually I cut it into eighths, and put it on a small sheet, and broil it for 15 minutes. And then you're going to turn it as it starts to blacken around the edges.
Right.
And you take it out and put it into a nice, big, sterile jar with 2 cups of bourbon, and you let it sit for at least a week. It gets better the longer
Yeah.
it sits. And so I haven't tried these yet, but they smelled really good, and the batter tasted really good.
Sure, after a week, they would, right?
Yes.
Great idea.
And then another thing that I made, are these oatmeal cookies. And what happened here is the cherries, dried cherries, were soaked in bourbon. And then you did have some bourbon in the recipe. In the brownies, the pecans were soaked in bourbon. And that was also, the rest of it was used in the recipe.
Right.
But again, the alcohol evaporates, so
And that's
know,
what I've been
it's-
thinking about the cooking, is the alcohol does evaporate and you're left with the flavors. So
really good flavor.
really good flavor, yeah. Yeah.
Then there's also different glasses, you know, and of course, the rocks glass, if you're going to be sipping, and when you're doing that, you also want a solid piece of ice. You want it to melt slowly so it doesn't dilute your alcohol. And I just happen to have these cute little ice cubes. I got this when we went to Four Roses.
Right.
I've always got this
This
full.
is actually is in the shape of a rose, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, and you also have a really cool glass at Macadoodles. It's square, and it has a rubber angle, and you put the water in, and it freezes the ice right in the glass.
That's right.
And then you take that off and pour your bourbon,
And
and
it just works perfect, yeah. Keep it in
Yeah.
the freezer. And always put your glass in the freezer as well. That helps, right?
yes.
And so this is a 4-rose ice
Yes.
maker. And we've got 4 roses here.
Oh,
So we happen to have 4 roses here, so we'll schlep some in here. And then you can try it later on, right?
yes.
There we go. Also mention on
nice.
ice, too, there's a thing called cracked ice.
Yeah.
So
haven't
cracked
heard of
ice
that.
is clear ice, right?
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people's refrigerators at home is not clear. It's got air in it, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's what gives it that milky color.
Okay.
But if you use real cracked ice, which is the clear ice, and the reason they call it cracked ice is you put it in the glass, and once you put the spirit over it, you'll hear it cracking,
Yeah.
right? And those are the kind of ices you buy actually from the store in the bag. Normally, manufacturers of ice would use the clear ice. So if you really want to get technical about it, you should use cracked ice. It's probably more preferred.
Well, I do use filtered water when I do this, but still, they don't come out completely clear.
They don't, yeah.
But that's okay.
That's okay.
It does its job. And then the Glencairn glass, of course, for tasting
Absolutely.
bourbon. This is not for sipping.
Yeah.
You know, you can see the color. It's wide at the bottom, so you can see the color. But then, as you bring it up, you get the nose or the
That's right. And we have these glasses. A great Father's Day gift, by the way.
yes.
But these were originally for Scotch whiskey. So if you go to Scotland and Ireland, this is what they'll use.
Okay.
But the application is great for bourbons too. It's the same thing. But this is the real tasting glass, the Glencairn glass. It has this shape to it. It's designed specifically to be used for tasting. Yeah. It's a great glass. So you want to have a couple of these handy, right?
I bought a few,
Yeah.
just a few. Okay, and also for the home bar. How do we put it together? What bourbons?
Well, one of everything, right?
Yeah. Ideally.
It's a good question, right? So if you're doing a home bar and you've got people coming over and everyone wants to taste bourbon, I think what you want to do is you want to have, good, better, best, right? So you wanted to have some everyday bourbons like the Maker's Mark or the Jim Beams and the Jack Daniels, and those are going to allow you to mix, bourbon and Coke and for people who want that. The lesser expensive ones, right? And then, I'd recommend a couple of straight bourbons, definitely. You probably want to have a rye on hand, because a bourbon rye drinker is a bourbon rye drinker.
Yeah.
So they're going to say to you, well, do you have any rye? So an everyday bourbon, a couple of straight middle market bourbons, a rye of some kind, and of course you're allocated if you can find them, which is your higher end, as well. And by contrast, if you want to have a couple of flavors on hand, some of the more popular ones, like we mentioned earlier, the honey, is always very, very popular, and any other flavors. You can mix your cocktails. They're very simple, like a Manhattan, so you don't necessarily, need to invest in those things. So some basic things to make the cocktails are always available.
Okay.
And I would, if I could, I would extend that also.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
you've got some things you haven't talked about.
Well, there's a couple of things I haven't talked about, because one of the discussion points was what do you have on your bar, right?
Right.
And while this is all about bourbons, it's also about whiskey, right?
Yeah.
And, it goes beyond just the American classic bourbons that we've talked about today. You still have the Scotch whiskeys. So it's probably good to have a Scotch whiskey on hand. Of course, most affordable Scotch whiskeys are blends, like a Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
Or if you want to have a single malt, like this is 12-year. They're more expensive, but a single malt's always good to have. And then, there you go. You got a Glenfiddich there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We left it at home. This is empty. But
It's empty, right? So there's a
yeah,
Glenfiddich.
same thing.
Yeah.
This one's a 14-year.
Yeah, 14-year. And then, of course, Irish.
Yeah.
Irish whiskeys are extremely popular today and gaining in popularity. And so they're very similar to Scotch whiskey. If you want to have both, that's great. But if not, one or the other, I would recommend.
So whiskey and bourbon, well, as far as in the U.S., except Canada calls theirs whiskey.
He calls it whiskey, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't bring a Canadian whiskey with me, but the most popular one that everybody knows about is Crown Royal. But Canadian whiskeys are getting very popular as well, and there's some very good ones out there. Yeah. So you really have three. You have Scotch whiskey and Irish, which you can kind of put together. You have Canadian whiskeys, and then you have the American bourbons. Yeah.
Wow. And we have tons of them.
And we have lots of we have lots to choose from. That's exactly right.
Variety is spice of life.
Yeah,
Golly.
and it's, again, it's one of the growing categories, and I think it will continue to be that way. It's becoming extremely popular and extremely diverse. So, you know, it might be best if you're a bourbon drinker to work your way through and try some different things. There are some people today who are brand loyal, which is great. You know, some people really like a particular kind and they'll stick with it. And then there are other folks out there who will just experiment with different ones.
Yeah.
We do have a tasting bar at Macadoodles, so you know, if you want to taste a particular one and it's available at the tasting bar, ask for help and somebody will give you a little sample.
Wow. I haven't done that. I've done the wine tasting, but
It's available, yeah. So we have one open. You know, we have a lot of bottles that we have open.
yeah.
And yeah, they'll sample one.
So could I just peek behind and see what's open?
You can peek behind and see what we've got. Yeah, some of these actually come from the tasting bar. So yeah, somebody can help you do that, and we have little serving cups, and we're happy to do that for you. Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's, you know, just fascinating, all the things that you can do with bourbon. I mean, mostly people think, you know, they just drink it. But it can do so much more as far as in your cooking and, you know, the different nuances of each one.
Absolutely.
They really are different.
They're very different, and it can become a great part of your culinary journey, you know, and particularly I like the fact that you've emphasized cooking with it, which there's just so many recipes out there. So
Yeah.
mixing it, making cocktails like the Manhattan and the mint julep and some of the more popular ones, you know, a whiskey sour, very simple to do. And then straight, you can do so much. And then, of course, there's a lot of diversification like we talked about if you want to try something different.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Golly. Anything else you can think of?
Well, you know, stocking up for Father's Day, right?
That's right.
It's a great gift
Yeah.
idea, right? So, you know, we really promote that at our stores. Father's Day is around the corner, so it's a great gift idea. And of course, you can pick up, you know, things like the glasses and
Yeah, a
and
few
different-
little
a
accessories.
few little accoutrements and accessories, you know, to help along. And if your father is a bourbon drinker, try something different. You know, surprise him with something
That he
new
hasn't tried.
that he
or
hasn't tried
that you've never
before you.
seen on his shelf.
Well, right, yeah.
Do we have any
Exactly.
questions? We have a couple people in our studio audience. No, nothing?
We may have covered everything.
I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah. Don't forget the devil's cut.
Yes, that's in the angel's air. Did
The
you say?
angel's share.
Air, angel's share.
Right.
Oh golly. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Oh, we do have a question.
The Devil's Cut, is that a certain brand, or is it just called Devil's Cut if you were going to buy it?
Yeah, it's a good time. It was actually it's part of the nomenclature. It's a term, the Devil's Cut, like Angel's Share. But Jim Beam, the brand Jim Beam, are the ones who pioneered it, and they have a label called the Devil's Cut, and they're the ones who came up with the process of extracting it from the wood in the barrel itself. So Jim Beam is the ones that actually did that. Although the term is part of the nomenclature, if you like, of the process. So it was really interesting when they did that. I don't know how they do it, but they do it, and it's blended together. So it's on the shelf, and it's actually labeled the Devil's Cut.
Anything else?
So is it quite a bit stronger in the proof then, or do you know?
Yeah, I think it is. It's a very rich flavor because obviously they can't get all of the bourbon out of the wood, so it's a blend, and so it's a very rich flavor. I know that much, and yeah, it's a high proof. Yeah, but it's quite affordable. It's not in the allocated category. It's quite affordable.
Okay.
And it's on the shelf, yeah. But it's a Jim Beam product.
That's amazing. Okay, that's it. We're going to wrap up. I want to thank Tony for coming and sharing time and all of his knowledge with us today. And remember, we are a nonprofit. I will be back next month with an all-new show, maybe grilling or who knows what.
Maybe something with tequila.
There you go. Yeah,
just-
that's a
I'm just
that's a
saying.
great idea.
Yeah, good idea, yeah.
Yeah, and tequila is only Mexico.
Only Mexico. It has to be made in only Mexico, yeah.
Okay, so thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.